You are standing on a dusty plateau in southeastern Turkey. The wind is hot. The land is dry. The horizon rolls away in pale limestone and scrub grass. The year is 1963. Researchers from the University of Chicago are walking across a rounded hill the locals called Göbekli Tepe, Belly Hill. They see broken limestone slabs, scattered fragments. They record the site. Then they mostly dismiss it. Maybe a cemetery, maybe a medieval ruin, nothing worth rewriting the story of civilization over. So they leave. And they are wrong by more than 11,000 years. For decades, the hill sits in silence. Local farmers drag plows across the mound. Their tools strike hidden stone. Sometimes they break the limestone to clear their fields. They are not breaking ordinary rock. They are striking the bones of one of the earliest monumental sites ever built by human hands. Then, in the 1990s, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt reads the old survey. Something about it bothers him. Schmidt comes to the Urfa plain. He walks the hills, and almost immediately, he sees what the 1963 team missed. This hill is not natural. This hill is made. Schmidt begins to dig, and almost immediately, the timeline of human civilization begins to crack. Beneath the soil are circles of massive T-shaped limestone pillars. Some stand more than 16 feet high. Some weigh many tons. The largest are so heavy they would have required planning, labor, coordination, and a shared purpose we were not supposed to see this early in human history. The oldest structures at Göbekli Tepe date back to around 9600 BCE. Think about that. That is the end of the last ice age. Before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before metal tools, before pottery, before the wheel, before the first cities. The people who built this place were not kings. They were not citizens of a state. They were communities living at the edge of a changing world, still tied to hunting and gathering, but beginning to experiment with something new. And somehow, they cut giant pillars out of bedrock with stone tools. They dragged them across the hill. They raised them upright. They arranged them inside sunken stone enclosures. We are often taught that civilization moves in a straight line. First, people settle down. Then they farm. Then they build villages. Then they create temples and gods. Göbekli Tepe does not follow that line. It turns around and stares back at us from the dark. Here's the unsettling possibility Göbekli Tepe raises. Maybe religion came first. Maybe the need to gather and build sacred spaces created farming, not the other way around. Klaus Schmidt believed Göbekli Tepe was a temple on a hill, a place where scattered hunter-gatherers groups came together for rituals, feasts, and enormous building projects. In his vision of the story, the pull towards the sacred was so strong that it pushed people towards the settlement, towards food storage, towards organization, towards the world that came next. And it was a powerful idea. But Göbekli Tepe has never stopped changing. Every decade the hill gives back a little more of itself. Archaeologists have now found domestic buildings, cisterns cut into bedrock, thousands of grinding stone, traces of food processing, evidence of feasting. Göbekli Tepe was just not a temple. It was a community built around ritual, a settlement with a sacred heart. And to understand that heart, you have to look at the stones. Drop down into one of the great enclosures. Imagine the walls rising around you, the floor beneath you, the sky overhead. What reigns are pillars, and the pillars are just not blocks of stone. They are bodies. The T-shape is widely understood as a stylized human form. The vertical shaft is the torso. The horizontal block is the head. Some pillars have long arms carved down their sides, hand bending inward, long fingers resting near the front of the stone. Some wear belts. Some wear loincloths. They are human, but not fully human. They have no faces, no eyes, no mouths, no expressions. Faceless watchers in a world before writing, and around them, carved into the stone, is a menagerie of animals. Foxes, snakes, boars, birds, aurochs, scorpions, wild creatures, many of them tense, sharp, dangerous. This is not the gentle animal world of a children's story. It is a world that bites, a world where a bad step in the dark could mean venom, tusk, claws, or death. One pillar shows a predator confronting a boar. Another famous stone, Pillar 43, the so-called vulture stone, shows birds, a scorpion, other animals, and a small headless human figure. These are not decorations. They are messages. This is the first great problem of Göbekli Tepe. The stones are covered in messages, but we cannot read them. There is no Rosetta Stone for the prehistoric mind. No inscription that says, "This is our God." No tablet that says, "This is our myth." No priest handbook. No creation story. Only stone, animal, bodies, hands, belts, snakes, birds, headless figures, and silence. That silence has made Göbekli Tepe irresistible. Because when a site is this old, this strange, and this incomplete, people rush to fill the gaps. Some researchers have suggested the carvings reflect the sky, seasons, constellations, remembered celestial events. Pillar 43 in particular has attracted bold interpretations. To some, the animals are not just animals. They are symbols in a prehistoric calendar, a record of the heavens, maybe even a warning carved in stone. This is an intoxicating idea, a 12,000-year-old message encoded on a pillar. But the excavation team has been far more cautious. The shapes may represent animals, buildings, stories, spirits, clans, dangers, ancestors, or rituals we no longer understand. The animals may have been part of a symbolic language that it was clear to the people who carved them and lost to everyone who came after. That does not make the site less mysterious. It makes it more mysterious. Because the mystery is not that the message is hidden. The mystery is that the message is right in front of us, and we still cannot read it. These people were not simple. They were observing, organizing, planning, remembering, carving a symbolic world into limestone long before the first written language. And they were doing it at the exact moment the world was changing around them. Around Göbekli Tepe, the climate was shifting. The Ice Age world was ending. Herds moved. Wild plants changed. The old life, hunting, gathering, moving with the seasons, was beginning to collide with something new. Settlement, storage, cultivation, the first steps towards farming. At Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists have found huge quantities of animal bone, wild game. The people here were still deeply connected to the hunt. The stones themselves seemed obsessed with the wild, the fox, the boar, the snake, the vulture, the dangerous animal presence pressing in from every side. That may be one of the deepest truths carved into the hill. Göbekli Tepe was built by people standing between two worlds. Behind them was the wild, ahead of them was the farm. Behind them were the moving herds, ahead of them were fields, walls, inheritance, inequality, and a long road to civilization. We often imagine farming as a triumph, full bellies, permanent homes, progress. But for the people who lived through that transition, it may have also felt like a loss, a narrowing of the world, a frightening new dependence on land and seasons and animals that had to be managed rather than followed. Seen that way, the terrifying animal carvings began to feel different. Not decorations, not mythology, maybe memory. Maybe a community carving the wild world into stone before it disappeared. And then the archaeologists found the skulls. In 2017, researchers reported something deeply unsettling from the fill of Göbekli Tepe's temples. Fragments of human skull. Not whole burials. Not bodies laid peacefully in graves. Skull fragments. Some had been deliberately modified. Deep grooves had been carved into the bone. One fragment had a drilled hole. This may have been evidence of a previously unknown form of Neolithic skull cult. That phrase sounds sensational, but skull cults are not fantasy. In the early Neolithic Near East, human skulls were sometimes removed, preserved, displayed, plastered, painted, treated in ways that suggest ancestor veneration, ritual power, or a special relationship with the dead. And suddenly the headless human figures on the stones become harder to dismiss. Were they victims, ancestors, spirits, the transformed dead? Were vultures connected to death, exposure, or the passage from the body to something beyond the body? We do not know. But we do know this was a place where life, death, animals, memory, and architecture were bound together. The stones were not built for comfort. They were built for awe, and maybe for fear. And then, in 2023, excavators found something extraordinary. A life-size statue of a wild boar, carved from limestone more than 10,000 years ago, and it still carried traces of pigment. Red, black, white. The tongue had been painted red. For years, archaeologists suspected the stones may once have been painted. The boar made that idea vivid. Try to imagine it. Not the pale, dusty stones we see today. Figures painted in color. Boars with red mouths. Carved animals sharpened by pigment. Faceless pillars standing in ritual spaces. Firelight moving across stone. People gathering into heat. In the dark. In the dust. In the smell of food. Blood. Sweat. Smoke. And limestone. Whatever Göbekli Tepe was, it was not quiet. It was not a dead ruin. It was alive. For a long time. And then, something happened. For years, experts believed the great circular enclosure had been intentionally buried. That the people of Göbekli Tepe deliberately filled their own sacred building with debris, sealing them under thousands of tons of earth. A ceremonial goodbye. A community burying its own gods. But newer research suggests that the ending may have been messier. The great enclosures were built in lower areas of the mound, below surrounding ridges and slopes. Over time, slope slide, erosion, rubble, and human activity transformed the site. Some structures appear to have been damaged, others were repaired. Terrace walls were built to stabilize part of the hill. In other words, the people may not have buried Göbekli Tepe in a single grand ritual. They may have fought to save it. The hill may have been moving around them. Rain, gravity, collapse, and time pushed earth and rubble down into sacred spaces. People repaired walls, rebuilt rooms, adapted again and again. The mountain kept taking. And eventually, the great circular spaces were abandoned. Not all at once. Not in one clean ending, but slowly. The old forms gave way to new ones. The huge circles faded. By around 8000 BCE, Göbekli Tepe's great age was over. The hill returned to wind, dust, and silence. And then it slept for nearly 10,000 years. Today, Göbekli Tepe is no longer silent. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It sits under a sweeping modern canopy of steel and fabric. Tourists walk the platforms, staring down at pillars older than every empire they have ever heard of. And beneath their feet, much of the site remains unexcavated. Geophysical surveys suggest many more monumental buildings may still lie inside the mound. More pillars, more symbols, more rooms, more unanswered questions. That is where the real mystery lives. Not in the theories about lost civilization or secret knowledge passed down by survivors of some forgotten catastrophe. Those stories are seductive. They feel cinematic. They give the stones a clean answer. But Göbekli Tepe does not need a lost civilization to be extraordinary. The real story is already astonishing. People at the edge of Ice Age. No metal, no pottery, no will, no kings, no cities. They organized themselves to build monumental architecture. They carved symbolic stone bodies. They gathered in ritual spaces. They processed food. They honored or transformed the dead. They survived one of the greatest transitions in human history. That is no less amazing than a lost civilization. It is more amazing. Because it means the people who built Göbekli Tepe were not waiting for civilization to arrive. They were inventing pieces of it, slowly, unevenly, brilliantly, in ways we are only beginning to understand. And archaeology moves slowly for a reason. A buried site is not a treasure chest. It is a memory place made of soil. Every layer matters. Every stone has context. Every bone, seed, tool, wall, and fragment of ash is part of the story. Once you dig it out, you cannot put it back. You cannot undig a trench. The slow pace is not a cover-up. It is the only way to keep from destroying the very evidence we are trying to understand. That may be the hardest thing to accept about Göbekli Tepe. The hill gives answers slowly, and every answer creates another question. Was it a temple? Yes, but not only that. Was it a settlement? Yes, but not like a later town. Did hunter-gatherers build it? Yes, people standing between two worlds, carving the wild into stone before it disappeared. Were the stones painted? Yes. Red mouths, white pigment, color we are only now learning to see. Did they bury the enclosure intentionally? Maybe. Or maybe they fought to save them and the hill moved around them. What do the symbols mean? We don't know. The stones are covered in messages, and they are right in front of us. The oldest monumental buildings at Göbekli Tepe are nearly 12,000 years old, and we are still asking the first questions. Some mysteries have explanations, some don't. This one, this hill in southeastern Turkey, this belly of stone, is still deciding which one it wants to be. Subscribe if you're the kind of person who can't leave a question unanswered. Turn off the lights. The path ahead is dark, and the woods are deep. Do not walk them alone. Subscribe to stay in the light, or click the video on your screen to wander deeper into the shaded divide. We will be waiting.